Hello, everybody. I'm Ryan McNeil. This is the Builder by Day podcast. Today, what I want to do is have a relatively candid conversation that, quite frankly, not everybody's going to like, but the time has come for me to have this conversation and make it well known where I stand on certain issues. I'm going to be a little bit all over the place today because all I'm doing really is trying to extrapolate from my mind the thoughts that I've had and the conversations I've been having with people, and trying to put it here in this form. And quite frankly, I'll be all over the place because that's just the nature of this kind of conversation. I'd rather have it with somebody else, but it just doesn't, that opportunity doesn't really present itself at the moment. The motivation, or I guess the reasoning behind this, is twofold. I recorded an episode last week where I talked specifically about housing and affordability and my 2 cents on that from a home builder's perspective, from somebody in the construction industry. And I've watched that a few times, of course, because that's what you do in these podcasts. You record them, and then you review them, and you edit them, and then when you think you're happy with it, you put it out there for the world to see. And I've watched that podcast a couple of times, and I stand behind it. I agree with what I said there, but I think it's important for me to explain even further what it is that I'm trying to accomplish, or the message that I'm trying to put forth here, or perhaps even the motivation as to why I'm doing this. That message, or that episode that will be released following this one, this is now going to be the prelude to that. That episode was about things that I understand entirely, things that I know to be true, and that's why I was putting that forth. So I'm not going to ever come on here and pretend to be an expert on anything that I'm not an expert on. But when it comes to housing and housing construction, I'm an expert. I've been doing it for 20 years. I know it inside and out, certainly as it relates to this province, this municipality, this area where we build homes. But to get to the conversation I'm trying to have here today, as many of you know, the last few days, the last week or so has been wild between Donald Trump winning the election in the U.S. and all that has come and been triggered as a result of that, and all the different reactions to that. And then here locally and more, well, I guess what I should say, the other thing that's happened here locally is over the weekend and on Remembrance Day specifically on Monday, and in the days leading up to that, we're all aware that here locally in Nova Scotia, we had an incident where there was an elementary school who put forth a message that they didn't want military members or veterans to wear their uniforms to the Remembrance Day ceremony because they thought it may be triggering or troubling to some of the students. And most people were really pissed off by that. And they should be really pissed off by that. And then there were those who went to the other extreme and said, oh, well, you're all just being ignorant, and can't you be empathetic to the children who were at the school who might be traumatized by seeing a man or woman in uniform? And what I would say to that is, well, the children aren't the only people at the school. There are adults at the school. And if that is a real thing, if there truly are students in the school who may be traumatized or troubled by seeing someone in a military uniform based on their life experience to now, then it is the responsibility of those teachers at that school to remove the children from the ceremony. You don't tell the veterans, you don't tell the people who literally risked their lives to fight for our freedoms that they should not wear their uniform to the ceremony that is 100% about them. And it brings me to this bigger picture of what we're dealing with now. And there was another incident in Ontario with another school. You guys can look this up. I'm not going to misquote anything. I believe the school was called Sir Robert Borden. It was somewhere in Ontario. Again, in all their wisdom, these school staff or administrators did some crazy shit about playing some kind of Palestinian song at the Remembrance Day ceremony. And then when they were called out on it and they contacted the principal, he said something even more stupid. You can look up the quote. I would encourage you to look up the quote. It is something to the effect of, using their ceremony to recognize more than just quote unquote some white guy doing something in the military. That should really piss you off if you're a Canadian. And I mean fucking really piss you off. It really pisses me off. Now, in fairness, I'm a middle-class guy who grew up in a lower middle-class family out in the woods in rural Nova Scotia. I'm just a blue-collar worker. I'm very good at what I do, but as time goes on and the more I have conversations like this, what most of you are going to realize is, despite the fact that I am, yes, a pretty smart guy and quite successful and pretty reasonable and people like me and I've built a successful business, I'm still just a regular blue-collar guy who gets really pissed off when people cross me on things that I believe to be fundamental truths to us as human beings and as Canadians. And this thing that has gone on in the last few days has been just a clear sign of the disgusting rot that exists within our public school system that is continues to be supported and enabled by the weak government and politicians that we have who do nothing about it and or pretend it doesn't exist. We're having an election in this province this month, in the next couple of weeks. We have three parties in this province. We have the NDP and the Liberal and the PC, or Conservative government. As far as I'm concerned, none of those governments actually represent the people. Grassroots representation of the people and what it is that we want. And if you don't believe me, then ask yourself this question, and more importantly, go ask one of your MLAs who are running for election. Ask them a very simple question. Yes or no? If I vote for you, will you remove this wokeness and woke mind virus and gender ideology from our public schools? I guarantee you, nobody will say yes. Nobody. And then I ask you, of all the people you know and have conversation with on a regular basis, especially the parents who have children in school, what percentage of those people do you think are okay with the current state of our public school system? Is it 10% are okay with it? 5%? I can guarantee you what it isn't is it is not the majority of people. The majority of people have at least half a brain in their head and they can see what's happening in the world and they don't like where it's going. And the majority of people do not want anybody messing with the minds of their children in school. Teachers are supposed to educate children. There should be a curriculum of learning and they are supposed to deliver the curriculum and educate our children. They are not supposed to indoctrinate our children, and that is exactly what is happening. And it's been going on so long now that there are people who were children and spent their entire child life being indoctrinated through a public school system, and now they're in the school system. Now they're administrators and teachers and principals. And they might be good people at heart. They may even be doing what they think is right. As a matter of fact, many of them are doing what they think is right, but they've been indoctrinated to think it's right. But also what happens, and what is most likely more common to what's happening in our school system, for instance, is nobody is willing to speak up against it because, quite frankly, they will lose their job if they do. That's very clear. I have spoken with teachers who have told me that that message is very clear, and I don't fault people to some extent. I don't fault people who aren't willing to say something because they aren't willing to lose their job, because they have a mortgage to pay and mouths to feed and bills to pay. I get it. I completely get it. I understand it. So what I'm saying is, those of us who are not going to lose our job for speaking up need to speak up. I'm not losing my job. You can't take my job from me because I'm the boss. And I'm going to say what it is that needs to be said. And what I hope happens is other people who hear this and agree with me also say what needs to be said. And we need to come together as what is actually, I truly believe, to be the majority of people, even if it is the silent majority of people. We have to come together, and if nothing else, we have to at least start acknowledging and recognizing one another and standing behind one another and standing up for what we believe in. And I'm not suggesting that we should, this doesn't have anything to do with fighting with the people who don't agree with us. We don't have to do that. There's no fight necessary. What we need to do is lead by example. If I come back to the political side of it and what I said earlier, I truly do not believe there is a political party in this province that represents the will of the people, the average person. I don't believe there is a political party in this province who is going to do anything about the state of our public school system. I don't believe there's a party in this province who is going to stand up and say unequivocally that there will be no men in women's spaces. There will be no men on women's sports teams. I don't believe there is any political party who is going to stand up and say, we need to get real about what's happening and what's going on here with the state of our economy, with the state of our housing, with what's happening with our seniors who so many of them are just, if they're not already looking for a place to live, they're just barely scratching and clawing through and barely paying their bills. We need to address and acknowledge the problems that we have, and we need to start talking about those problems at the very basic fundamental level instead of allowing our politicians and political parties to distract us with this other shit that they always come up with to try to distract us from the real issue at hand. And I want to say something specific to that when I look at these three political parties that we have currently. First of all, it is my opinion that the Liberal and NDP party are one and the same. It's not that far-fetched. Look at it at the national level. The only reason the Liberal Party is even still in power is because Jagmeet Singh and his NDP propped them up and continued to allow them to be in that position. That's the only reason that even exists. And look at the damage that is being done to this country. Last week, Donald Trump won the election in the US. Since then, within hours of winning that election, he started to mobilize people and put people in place and do the things he told everyone he was going to do if he was elected. Now, I don't care if you like Donald Trump or not. Set that aside for a moment and just ask yourself, what, if anything, are his policies that you don't like? And even if you don't like some of his policies, he was elected. The majority of Americans voted for him, and they voted for him to do what it is that he said he was going to do, and he's doing it. He's not even the president yet, and he's already put these incredibly intelligent and competent people in place to do these things that undoubtedly are going to have a massive, incredibly positive impact on that country. But in this country, we have a political party in power that is led by a narcissist who Donald Trump clearly does not like. Nobody likes our prime minister. And everyone talks about what's going to happen when the U.S. does this and the U.S. does that, and all the people they're trying to deport are going to kind of flood to our borders, and what's going to happen when they put tariffs in place and all these. And people are all arguing about that. They're all running around in circles arguing about that. And look, folks, let's cut the shit. The average person has absolutely no idea what they're talking about when it comes to international and global economics and tariffs and immigration. And so we don't know anything about that. Just be honest with yourself when these conversations come up. And instead of arguing about things that you have no idea about, and I also have no idea about, but instead of arguing about that, look at the fundamental things that all of us can understand. I'm going to give you an example when it comes to illegal immigration, for instance. And not the immigration process itself, but I mean the people who are in the country illegally. We have the same thing happening here in this province. And as soon as you say this, undoubtedly right now there are people watching this podcast. Even a minute ago when I said immigration, immediately, as soon as I say the word immigration, those people are thinking that I'm some kind of racist person. I didn't make any reference at all to where this immigration is coming from. It could be coming from Ukraine or Russia or Norway or Sweden or Iceland. I'm not referring to where it's coming from. I'm just talking in general terms. If you have somebody who is in your country illegally, then something has to be done about that. They should be removed from the country. They should be sent back around to the line and told that if you want to come to the country, you do it legally. We have a process. So do it legally. Come through the front door. No different than you're going to find that I like to use a lot of analogies, and I do it for, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm not smart enough to understand it myself without using a simple analogy, but let me use this one. When it comes to immigration, and specifically when it comes to this argument about whether or not people who are in the country illegally should be allowed to stay here, I want you to think about it like this. For any of you who own a home, if you owned a home and you were somebody who offered people to live in your home, provided there was enough room for them to be there, and provided that they came through the front door and they had to go through a certain process and they had to have a conversation with you and they had to answer certain questions and they had to check certain boxes. And if they did all of that, then they could come through the front door and be given a place to live in this home or this property that you have. That's a perfectly reasonable and logical thing to expect. That's a perfectly reasonable and logical thing that happens. And it's on a larger scale. That's how immigration works in the country. We say, look, we're welcoming of people to come here. As a matter of fact, we want people to come here, especially if you're bringing some skills and some know-how that we can use and to our own benefit. But you got to come through the front door and you have to follow the procedure. So if you were somebody that had that property or that home and you welcomed people to come into your home and you gave them a place to stay and you allowed them to do the work they do and flourish and build a life for themselves here in this country, living in your home, fantastic. But if you went downstairs and you realized that a group of people had snuck in the back door and they didn't come through the front door and they didn't answer the questions and they didn't do a credit check and they didn't do any of these things that you require, would you allow them to just stay in your home? And if you did a little research on them, you realize, well, I don't know that I can trust you since the first thing you did was break into my home. That's essentially the same scenario that we have here. Now, people will argue and say, well, these people didn't break into their home. They came here on a student visa, and then they just decided to stay, and we think they should be allowed to stay. Well, I don't. I went to another country at one point in my life on a student visa, and it was very clear. You come here to get educated. When your education is finished, you go back. If you want to come back in for some other reason, go back around to the front door and make whatever application it is, and come through the front door, and if we're willing to accept you, then that's how it works. So if we would just look at everything logically instead of everybody getting so emotional and worked up about everything, I actually don't think there are many things in this country that we would even argue about. I believe that the vast majority of people are supportive of the same things. Ultimately, I think that everybody that I talk to, and I think that the majority of people out there believe that everyone should be entitled to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. We should be able to say what we want to say and think what we want to think. Everyone should be entitled to an equal opportunity to flourish in this country. Everyone should be entitled to the same rights and freedoms as everybody else. And if you stay at that fundamental level and you work from there, I think everything would be fine. But that's not how it happens. What happens is an issue will come up, and I'm going to come back to the public school issue. I'm going to come back to this state of our public school system. And look, I will say this before I go any further. I have a lot of friends and acquaintances and associates and fellow hockey parents and people I know in the community and people I have customers, previous clients of mine who are school teachers and administrators and principals. And I'm hard on the school system right now. And I want to say to those of you who, you're not in on it, I guess, but perhaps you're not willing to risk your job yet. I'm not finding fault with you. And I want to say, please don't misinterpret this as if I'm trying to group all teachers together. But something has to be done and it has to be changed. A few weeks ago, there was an incident, I guess we could call it, which hit home for me as well because it happened at the school I went to, the elementary school I went to. Now, the physical building itself is no longer the same because when I went there, it was a grades 4 to 6. That building had since been torn down, and it's now, I believe, primary through 9th grade. But nevertheless, that's irrelevant. It's in the community where I went to school. And last month, I believe it was, I think it was only a month ago now, there was a scenario where somebody, I believe it was one of the administrators at the school, knew someone who, I don't know, perhaps was a friend of theirs. I don't know the relationship. It's irrelevant. And this person was brought into the school to speak to 7th to 9th graders. And this person, I don't care. I'm not going to mention their name. We're not going to put their Instagram page up here on the website. But look, you can look it up. This isn't a secret. Let's just say, at the very least, this person had no business being in the school. They don't bring any professional experience of any kind. They don't have any professional designations. They simply came there to talk to 12 to 14 or 15-year-olds about their own personal beliefs, their own personal lifestyle. And then they shared their Instagram link, I believe, with these 9th graders, which at the very least is wildly inappropriate. But if that's not bad enough, there were students in this school. I'm not making this up, folks. You can read the story. It was actually on CBC, I believe, and any other local media. If that's not bad enough, there were students who felt uncomfortable with this and wanted to leave, and they were not allowed to leave the room. I want you to tell me if there has ever been another example anywhere that you can think of at any point in our public school system, or any point if you're an adult and you've gone through the school system. Was there ever at any point a scenario where you sat in a room and somebody in the front of that room was saying something that made you feel, as a teenager or maybe perhaps even younger person, made you feel uncomfortable, and the teachers forced you to sit through it? Think of one example. I dare you. It doesn't exist because it never happened. Because our parents would have never let that happen. And now we're letting it happen because we don't want to have a fight with these 4 or 5 or 10% of people who are willing to argue with us about these, what should be very clear issues that the majority of people are simply not on board for. And that's how our government currently works. That's how they operate. Our government elected officials, I mean, at the end of the day, they're just regular people. Certainly at the federal level, the level of corruption is wild. It is unbelievable. I mean, again, I'm not making this up. All you have to do is read the news. Our federal government is corrupted. It's rotten. It's unbelievable. I honestly can't believe that it happens. Every time these things come up, I always say the same thing. I look at it and go, where is the opposition government? How is it that these government leaders and these politicians are robbing us and stealing from us, and it's being allowed to happen? And the answer is because there really is no opposition government. There really is no government that truly represents the people. When is the last time you ever heard a government say, or anyone that's running for election, when is the last time, if ever, that you heard any of them say, if they are elected, they are going to downsize the government? They are going to be focused on government efficiency and removing this bloated bureaucracy that we have at every level of government, every single level, municipal, provincial, and federal level. Nobody ever says that. Because if you say something like that, you are not going to be put forth as a candidate to represent any of these parties that are currently in power or considered the opposition to whoever's in power. And that's the reality of it. This is not going to change until we, the people, specifically the middle class, stand up, draw a line in the sand and say, we're not putting up with this shit anymore. So it's going to require those of us, specifically the men and women, for instance, that are in the construction industry, like me. Those of you who are self-employed business owners, like I am. Those of you who don't rely on a government paycheck or government funding of any kind, like me. We're going to need to stand up and step up and make this conversation, put this conversation at the forefront of what's happening and not let people dismiss it. And if they, which they do, if they attempt to call you names, then let them call you names. If they attempt to somehow, I guess for lack of a better term, try to cancel you, then let them try to cancel you. I'm just a home builder. I'm just a blue collar guy who grew up in rural Nova Scotia, and when I finished university as a young adult, when I got into the real estate business, I found a passion for home building, and I enjoy it. I love being in this business. And the reason this business works well for me is because by nature, I'm a bit of a visionary. And that bodes well for this profession because I have a vision for literally the homes that I build and the communities that I build. I have a vision. I will illustrate that vision. I will put it in the form of a written plan or drawings. And then I will gather the people that I know have the ability to make this vision come to life. And I guess at the risk of sounding melodramatic, my hope would be that this podcast would do the same thing. I have a vision for a government that represents the people instead of a government that represents whoever it is that is pulling the strings. And we all know it's not us. It's not us. Take anything that happens on any given day. Take any amount of money, or a scenario, for instance, where our federal government announces they're going to send however many millions or billions of dollars to some other country, rather than dealing with the Canadians who are living and dying on the street, rather than dealing with the seniors who can't afford to live in their apartments. We're sending billions of dollars to other parts of the world, while Canadians here at home are suffering. What people don't understand is that's our money. We're supposed to be the ones who say where our money goes. The government are just the people that we elect and put in position to manage the business of our country or the business of our province. And their duty should be 100% and only to the people of that jurisdiction. And that's not what's happening. It's way past time that we deal with this. And if nothing else, this podcast is nothing more than an opportunity for me to explain my vision for how I would like this to go. Not that I think my vision is in any way unique. I know this vision that I have is shared by many, many people, millions of Canadians. But they don't all have a platform to be able to put it forth. And they aren't all in a scenario or a situation where they can say it. So I'm going to say it. What we have to do is, those of us who are thinking rationally and logically, and who know right from wrong, and who are driven by the truth, we should be seeking the truth. We should be seeking the truth and trying to live a life that is motivated by finding meaning and pursuing that meaning and pursuing the truth and seeking and speaking the truth. For those of you who think I'm just a traditional or conservative guy and I can't see it the other way and so on, I'll be clear with you. However many years ago, I think it might have been back in 2007 or 8 perhaps, whenever it was, Darrell Dexter was the premier of the province and he was with the NDP. I voted NDP that year. I voted for Darrell that year. I actually played in a golf tournament, a home builders golf tournament, and he was in our group. And I got a chance to chat with him. We didn't talk politics, but I already knew at that point what his policy was. And he had put forth, they had done something that year when he was elected. I don't know if it was the first year he was elected, but during his time, they had done something at one point where they had reduced the HST or GST on new housing, and it made a huge impact. It made a huge impact in housing sales and affordability. It was great. It was an awesome idea. And he said he was going to do it, and he did it. And I met Darrell Dexter, and he was just a solid dude. We played golf. He was a good guy. When you meet people and you talk with them, I'm a very good judge of character. You give me 5 minutes of real person-to-person conversation, and I'd put myself on about a 99% chance of guessing right on the quality of that person that I'm talking to. And I considered him to be a solid guy, and he was. And I don't know, whatever. I don't know who took over after that. Quite frankly, back then I didn't pay a lot of attention to politics. That's back when, remember when politics were just, something that came up when it was time for an election? But now politics are in every single aspect of our lives. It's everywhere. There's nothing in our lives that has not been politicized. And the political strategy is to divide and conquer. And if you don't think that's correct, then just ask yourself, look at what the Liberal and NDP parties do compared to what the Conservative parties do. And keep in mind that I'm not a big fan of either. I'm just saying this is how this works. The Liberal and NDP parties do their very best to divide everybody into groups and then to try to determine who the victims are in that group and then appeal to the victims by insinuating they are going to somehow go after the bad guys, whether that be landlords, business owners, CEOs, or my favorite when they talk about rich people not paying their share. This is what you hear from the local NDP. This is what you hear from the national NDP party. This is what you hear from our prime minister. And then coming the other way from the Conservative Party, what you'll hear is they will typically more so attack those politicians rather than the issue at hand. But again, that's also not the right approach. If they were doing this correctly, what they would do is they would point out the fact that the Liberal and NDP politicians are purposely trying to use divisive tactics to divide the population and polarize us. And if somebody was doing that correctly, if the Conservative parties were doing this correctly, they would draw attention to that. And rather than falling into that trap, what they should do is identify it, acknowledge it, and then move away from it and talk about the issues at hand instead. But that's not what they do. It's turned into this back and forth catty bullshit. It's quite nonsensical. As a matter of fact, when you sit back here, and I'm sure you're not alone, there are many adults out there who look at this and you look at these politicians and honestly, in many cases, none of them have any practical or real world experience related to what it is that they're doing or the position that they hold. What qualifies our prime minister to be in the position he is in? What qualifications did he have when he got elected? The answer is none. He had zero qualifications to be the prime minister. And that's why 9 or 10 years later, our country is a fucking mess because it's been run by people who are grossly incompetent and worse yet, completely compromised by people who have entirely different motives and wants and needs than Canadians and the population that our government is supposed to be working for. I don't need to have this fight. I don't need to do this. Right? I can do it. I'm not worried about being canceled like some of you may be. Like, for instance, the gentleman I met with and spoke with last week on an episode, Mr. Greg Dempsey, who worked for the provincial government. There's an example of a guy who was fired for his political beliefs. There's no way around it. I'm not making that up. I'm not basing that even only on what he told me during that conversation. On social media, Greg has shared his termination letter. It's right there in writing. It's in writing from the provincial government as to why he was fired. He was fired for his political beliefs. He was fired for sharing a meme that they didn't like. And so I'm not in a scenario where you can't fire me. And quite frankly, I've had people ask me, say, Ryan, are you sure you want to do that, man? Are you sure you want to run the risk of pissing some people off and having people upset with you, and next thing you know, people are going to be calling you names? And look, I'm in the construction business. I've been in the construction business my entire adult life. I am no stranger to conflict, and I am no stranger to telling people to go fuck themselves if that's what I have to do. So that's what I'll do. And I'm not doing this because I want personal attention. I'm not doing this because I want any type of popularity or celebrityism. I'm in no way seeking that. What I want to do is, as much as it is possible for me, I want to have truthful conversations with other people who also want to have truthful conversations. And I want to try to foster the idea of setting an example. So as I've said a couple times, and I'll say again, I'm not interested in fighting with people. So if you have different views than I have on this, save yourself the time and effort of going to the comments section and calling me names and losing your mind over. Just, I'm not trying to convince you. If what I'm saying here rubs you the wrong way and you think that I'm an idiot and I have no idea what I'm talking about and I'm a conspiracy theorist or whatever you want to come up with, then that's cool. That's your thought. I don't want to argue with you about it. I want to talk to the other people who are listening to this and saying, yeah, you know what, that guy's right. And what I want to say to you folks is, I don't have the answer. I don't know where this goes. I truly don't. I just have a vision for how things should be. And I know that my vision is shared with other people. And I know my vision is shared with people who are much smarter than I am and do a much better job of articulating it than I do. But I think there's a role for regular blue collar working middle class guys like myself to also articulate it to the best of our ability to the people who we talk with and deal with every day who can understand us and agree with me. And all I'm asking at this point, and all I'm attempting to do at this point, I guess, is to start the conversation, and hopefully somebody else or other people out there who share these same values will reach out to me, and maybe we can put something together. Maybe we can start leading by example. I don't want to start, it's not that I want to fight with people. I want to start something. I want to get something moving that we can do based on the values that we all share, and show people that when we do things based on truth, when we seek the truth and when we pursue the truth and when we stick to our values, it will be better. It'll be more efficient. It'll be more productive. It'll be more effective than what's happening over here. And that could come in the form of nonprofit organizations that perhaps I am part of or could set up with some other people. I'm a business owner. I know how to operate a business. I do it really well. I don't have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to nonprofits, but there are certain things that I believe should be, at least in some form, should be done through nonprofit, whether that be different types of education, say private school type things. I have visions for what could be, very affordable private school, but more so almost organized homeschooling that allows parents to get involved and volunteer and be part of it, but help organize all this. And I, as a business owner, am willing to get behind that. I'm willing to get behind it financially to help it happen. And I know other business owners that are willing to get behind it financially to make it happen. And I'll do that. That's all I can commit to doing. I can only commit to doing the things that I know that I can control. But I have to make it known that I'm willing to do it so that other people out there, perhaps who are having similar ideas, reach out to me. I'll be clear that, look, I'm not an activist. So I'm not going to be somebody who's going to, grab a flag, go down a street corner and wave it around and confront people and shout back and forth. And that's just not me. That's not my personality. It's not who I am. I bring other things to the table, and I'm willing to do that. And undoubtedly, there are things that I didn't cover here today and things that I didn't articulate correctly. And this is just going to be the first of what will probably be many conversations along these lines, and hopefully conversations with other people who I can converse with, and we can try to throw it around and come up with some ideas. And that's not necessarily all going to happen on camera, of course. But it's important. I felt that it was important for me to, get the ball rolling, let people know what I'm attempting to do here and where I stand, and it goes where it goes. So I'll leave it at this. From this point and moving forward, I'm going to say what's on my mind, and I'm going to say what needs to be said, and I'm going to do what I believe to be right. That's going to piss a bunch of people off, and I'm fine with that. I'm not trying to fight with those folks, but I will. So if you bring the fight to me, then we'll have the fight. But that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is converse with the majority of people who I believe share the same values I have. And all I'm saying is I'm willing to do my part. So anyone else who's willing to do their part, we need to start getting together and doing it. And I think that if we do that, and if it comes from the right place and the right motivation, then the politics will take care of themselves. But we're not there yet. Our current political parties do not represent the people. They do not represent the majority. They bow down to those who scream the loudest. And that's the result is what we've seen in the last few days. The result is what we've seen manifest at these Remembrance Day ceremonies. And the result is what we see manifesting in the grotesque corruption at the federal government level. And if you're going to let it continue to happen, then it's just only going to get worse. If you let your government take away your rights and freedoms, then they will continue to take them away until you have none left. That's just how it'll work. So I'm not asking for anybody to do anything other than if you agree with what I'm saying and you think perhaps there is some significance to what I'm saying and perhaps you have something to add to it, then you could reach out and connect with me. Like or share the video. I'm a home builder who at one point, when I started my business, I was the only employee. For the first couple of years, I was my only employee. I had nobody with me whatsoever. So I was the guy who would get in the truck and go to the job site and unlock the doors and sweep out the houses and throw drywall in the dumpster and pick up Tim Hortons cups around the property and meet all the tradespeople and do all the walkthroughs and organize everything. I'm a home builder who started as being the one and only guy for several years of my business. So I know my business upside down. But I also, from day one, was the person who drew the home plans that I wanted to build, or at least sketched them and sent them to somebody who would then draw it in CAD form. So I always had a vision for what I wanted my company to be, and I always had a vision for what I wanted to build. And it's the same situation right now. I have a vision for what it is I would like to build, and I wholeheartedly believe that my vision is shared by millions of Canadians. So all I'm going to try to do now is the same thing that I've been doing for 20 years. I'm going to try to find the right people who have the skills and the expertise to help me build what I envision. And I would like other people, hopefully this motivates other people to also build what they envision, because I believe that this vision is shared across the country. I know it is because I know people who I have a lot of respect for, very smart, successful, honest people who share the same vision, who share the same opinion that I share. But some of them are in a position where they just simply can't speak out right now, or they can't take action right now. And so I guess I'll be the guy who has to do it. It's no different than if, you have a bunch of friends and maybe, remember when you were kids and you were all sitting down in the rec room and like somebody had to go upstairs and ask one of the parents if you could do something. And remember, you'd all sit around. I don't want to ask you. I don't know. You go. And then somebody had to go, okay, fine, fuck it. I'll go ask, right? Well, I'm that guy. Okay. I'll go ask. I'll take the chance of getting barked at by the parent who were asking if they can drive us to the store or whatever it is that we need. I'll take the risk on that because I think it'll be great for all of us. And I'm willing to step up to do it for all of you guys, my friends who also feel the same way. It's very much the same scenario here, okay? I'm going to step forward and hopefully some other people will step forward with me. Thanks for listening.